Okay, so if we were in a classroom and if I had my smartboard up, I would ask you to simplify the following. So I know a lot of you are going to do box, but for this, I'm going to do FOIL just to kind of move things along. So we know when you square x plus 7, it's really x plus 7 times x plus 7. Then we FOIL. We get x squared plus 7x plus 7x plus 49. We notice that there are like terms in the middle, so combining them gives us 14x. Our final answer is x squared plus 14x plus 49. All right, pretty straightforward. All right, so now let's look at number 2. I have y minus 3 squared. So remember, this is going to be y minus 3 times y minus 3. So when we FOIL, we have y squared minus 3y minus 3y plus 9. Again, we combine our like terms. Our final answer is y squared minus 6y plus 9. All right, so already I would say, do you notice anything about 14 and 49? Do you notice anything about 6 and 9? And I would have kids say, oh yeah, this is 7 plus 7, and this is 7 times 7. They would say, and this is negative 3 plus negative 3, and this is negative 3 times negative 3. I would say, okay. And remember way back in Unit 1 when we did all this, I told you if you could learn the shortcut, your life would be so much easier. Here's the shortcut. Square the a. Square the negative 8, leaving space. Multiply a times negative 8, you get negative 8a, and double it, because remember, it's the outer and the inner. So we would get a squared minus 16a plus 64. Oh, a squared, my bad. Let's look at this one. Square the b, square the 5. Multiply these two. B times 5 is 5b, double it because it's outer and inner. And notice this is always positive, because regardless if you multiply two negative numbers or you multiply two positive numbers, you will always get a positive result. Okay, so that would be like part 1 of my warm-up, and we would do this in like 2 or 3 minutes. And then I would say, okay guys, y'all seem to have the hang of it. Now let's work backwards. Okay, so I would ask you to fill in these blanks and then go from the expanded form to the condensed form, because here, this was the condensed form, we simplified it. Now I just want you to do the reverse of that, okay? So c squared plus 14c plus what? You would say 49, and it would be plus 49. And the reason that works is because we're taking c squared, we're taking 7 squared to make 49. How did I know it was 7? What's half of 14? 7. Okay, same thing here. So this is negative 5 plus negative 5. So this number has to be negative 5 times negative 5. Right? Negative 5 plus negative 5 makes negative 10. Negative 5 times negative 5 is 25. So this is going to be the variable minus 5 squared. Now, had this been plus, this would have been plus. All right. Next one. We have t squared plus 8t. Okay, what happens? This is 4 plus 4, so we would make this 4 times 4. And this is really t plus 4. Okay, notice, square root of 49 is 7. Half of 14 is 7. Square root of 25 is 5. Half of 10 is 5. Square root of 16 is 4. Half of 8 is 4. Dang, Robodeer, you always have to throw one in. Yeah, I do. Okay. Half of 3 is 3 halves. Square it. 3 times 3 is 9. 2 times 2 is 4. That's always positive. So what goes here? R plus the half. That's how it works. You take this number, take half of it, square that half, and then you can turn this into factored form like this. Okay, so what we did here was we're making a square of a binomial. Do y'all see that? That happened all the way through. binomial squared, binomial squared, binomial squared, binomial squared. But in order to make the square, we have to come up with a number here. So what would we have to fill in with this blank to make this a square? In other words, we would have to complete this expression to make it a square. So when we talk about completing an expression to make it a square, we're really talking about completing the square, okay? So these are the notes, you have the filled ins. All right, so we've discussed what happens when you can split the middle or use product sum. There are two other ways to solve. Today we'll talk about quadratic formula, and then on Thursday today we'll talk about completing the square. Thursday we'll talk about our final lesson, which will be the quadratic formula. Okay, so let's look at something like this. If I wanted to factor it, what would I do? Well, remember, we play the product sum game. So I need to find two numbers that have a product of -19 and a sum of -6. Okay, so what two numbers multiply to make -19, but at the same time add to -6? Well, we know they're going to be opposites, and we know that the larger number has to be negative because our sum is a negative. Okay, that's what we have. So dang, this thing is not factorable. Yeah, it's not factorable, Robodeer, but you're still going to make me solve it. Yes, I am. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to kind of follow and see what happens here. Okay, and it looks like I need to focus this. Okay, I don't know if that's the same. We'll see. All right, so what I did was I wrote the steps over here and I gave the example. Okay, so let's bring my original back in. I need to solve for x squared minus 6x minus 19. Well, the first thing we have to do is we want the variables on one side and everything else on the other. So to get rid of minus 19, we're going to have to add 19 to both sides. So that's what we did here. If you saw me teaching this, and when you look at the examples, you'll see that what I would do is add 19, add 19. When we do that, we get x squared minus 6x equals 19. Now, when I complete the square, remember in the warm-up, we had a blank here, put the blank there. And if you would, please go ahead and put the blank on the other side. And here is why. This is an equation. What I do on one side has to be done on the other side as well. So that's what I did, okay? So think about the completing the square that we just did in our 5 through 8s here. That's what I'm going to be referencing, okay? So I'm going to take half of 6. What is half of 6? Or half of -6? -3, all right? So think about it. This is -3 plus -3. So that here I'll have -3 times -3, okay? So when I do that, I'll get x squared minus 6x plus 9. But remember, guys, this is an equation. So if we add 9 to the left, we must add 9 to the right. So that's this step, okay? That's this step here. Now, this compacts to x minus 3, the quantity squared. And we have 19 plus 9 to equal 28. All right, now we're here, okay? I need to get rid of the square. How do I get rid of the square? By taking the square root. But remember, you have to consider the positive square root and the negative square root. So we use this symbol. So when we do that, the square root of x minus 3 squared is x minus 3. And then over here we simplify because this is really the square root of 4 times the square root of 7. The square root of 4 is 2, and we bring over the square root of 7. And there it is. All right. Now, what am I going to do next? I'm going to add 3 to both sides. We would put this here. We would put this here. And we keep it in front. We keep it separate. You always put your pretty terms in the front, the easy terms, the real terms. You put the more complex expressions in the back. All right, so there are 2 answers, and these are it. Now, sometimes they're going to ask for decimals, so you'll put this in your calculator, 3 plus 5.29, and you'll get this answer, 3 minus 5.29, and you'll get that answer. Okay? All right. I'm ready to try one with you. And I'm going to zoom in on this so that you can sort of see it just a little more. All right. All right, that's beautiful. Okay, here we go. D squared plus 14D minus 5 equals 9. Okay, I am focusing, sorry. Still not as good, but what do you do? All right. Remember, the variables have to stay on one side. Everything else moves to the other. I need to get rid of minus 5. So how do you unsubtract 5? You add it back in. But if I add it on the left side, I add it on the right side. So I'll get D squared plus 14D. We're going to leave a blank here, equals 14. And let's put a blank there. All right. Now we complete the square. We take half of 14, which is 7. And then we square 7 to get 49. If we add 49 on the left side, we must add 49 on the right side. All right. Now let's go ahead and do the factored form. We'll get D plus 7 squared, and over here we'll get 63. Now I'm going to write this in just a couple of times, but after this I will probably stop. All right, so we're going to get D plus 7 squared equals positive or negative square root of 63. All right, 63 is not a square, but what is in 63 that is a square? Well, this is really 9 times 7. So we'll get D plus 7 equals the positive or negative 3 times the square root of 7. Remember now, we want to solve for D. So what am I going to have to do? I'm going to have to subtract from both sides. So when I do that, I'll get negative 7 plus or minus 3 square root of 7. Oops, there it is. Okay? And that's what you do. This is crazy because completing the square was not my favorite, but then as I started teaching more and more, and I would have to make answer keys, or I went to math competitions, I found it so much easier to complete the square to find solutions than it was to solve this using any other method. I know that sounds so weird, but it's what worked. All right, let's look at number 2. All right, so we're going to do the same thing. We isolate our variables. That means we need to get rid of this 9. So we'll have p squared minus 10p. We'll leave a blank. That equals negative 9 blank. All right, so now take a minute. Think about what you do to negative 10 and think about what goes in the blank. All right, half of negative 5. I'm sorry, half of negative 10 is negative 5. Negative 5 times negative 5 is 25. Oh, I should have done that in a different color just for kicks. Okay, now if I add 25 on the left, I must add 25 on the right. Now I'm going to write this in factored form. This is p minus 5 squared, and negative 9 plus 25 is 16. What's my next step? My next step is to take the square root of both sides. Okay, let's talk about this plus or minus that goes in front for a minute, okay? This plus or minus really belongs over here because we have a variable. And you always want to guarantee that what's inside the radical is not negative. So that's why people started putting the plus or minus there. But then you realize, well, that's an extra step in algebra that we would have to do. So it's so much easier just to go ahead and bring the plus minus over here. I would show you, but it would cause so much more confusion than anything. And right now, not confusing you is my goal. Okay, so the radical takes away the square. I'm left with p minus 5. The square root of 16, I have to consider positive 4 and negative 4. Now we're going to add 5 to both sides. And when we do that, sorry, we'll get P equals 5 plus or minus 4. All right, so then we look at 5 plus 4. We get 9. We look at 5 minus 4. We'll get 1. So my solutions are 1 and 9. And that's it. That's all we do. Okay? All right. So there's that. Let's look at number 3. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing here. So this one, I see that when I factor it, there might be something that goes there, but I'm really tired and I don't want to make a list. So I'm just going to complete the square. So in order to complete the square on this one, we will subtract the 90 from both sides. We get m squared plus 16m equals negative 90. And again, I always draw blanks on both sides. That way I know if I do something to one side, I must do the same thing to the other side to maintain equality. Okay? And it's like I used to tell my statistics students. Have you ever heard of the phrase where you can't remember something, you draw a blank? Well, draw blanks here. Because if you can't remember what to do, maybe having these will help you. Because from there, it's sort of a cue. Okay, something fills in there. What is that something? Well, take half of 16. Half of 16 is 8. We'll now square the 8. We get 64. So we add 64 to the left. We add 64 to the right. We get m plus 8 squared equals negative, what is that, 26? Okay. Now we'll take the square root of both sides. When we do that, I get m plus 8 equals, and then I go to take the square root and nope, it's not happening. Nope. Because you can't take the square root of a negative number. So guess what? This one has no solutions. Okay? That's as far as you can go. And sometimes you're going to say, so really what I want to do is end up with the negative on the right side because you can't take the square root of a negative and there's no more work for me to do. Exactly. But just be cautious because it's not going to happen all the time. All right. Y'all okay with that? Okay. Let's look at number 4 now. All right. So in order to solve this, I need to isolate my variables. So I'm going to put n squared minus 28 on one side. I need to get rid of plus 192. So how do you unadd? Oh, you subtract. So we get n squared minus 28n, there's our lovely blank, equals negative 192. Oh, negative 192 looks kind of promising because I may end up with a negative and I can't take the square root of a negative and there's way less work for me to do, Robideer. Yep. Okay, now I'm going to show you a little trick that I used to teach my seniors because we also do this in Algebra 2. You'll do this in your advanced math, but we used to have a class called Algebra 3. And some of those students, they were so sick of completing the square, they couldn't do all those steps at once. So this is what we came up with. We have our n squared minus 28n blank. They would go ahead and fill in this. They know the variable is going to be n. They had no idea what to do now. So I would ask them, okay, take half of negative 28. Half of negative 28 is negative 14. Now, what's negative 14 times negative 14? Oh, that's 196 because I memorized those sheets of squares you gave me, Robideer. So I do the same thing over here. Negative 192 plus 196 is 4. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and, do this here. Remember, we're going to do that. So we get that n minus 14 equals positive or negative 2. Then we add the 14 to both sides. So we get n equals 14 plus or minus 2. And honestly, I should do the subtraction first if I were the type who, well, I am that type, never mind. But usually you see things visually as they're laid out, and that's the order in which you do those things. So 14 plus 2 is 16, okay? And then 14 minus 2 is 12. But when I report my solutions, they are 12 and 16. I mean, you'll notice I leave it like that. I just want to see the two answers somewhere because honestly, you see all the work that's involved here. So, you know, you don't want your work or your solutions to get lost somewhere. All right, let's look at number 5. All right. So we need to take the 7 to the other side. And the way we're going to do that is by subtracting. So we subtract the 7 on both. So we get b squared plus 8b blank equals negative 7 blank. Okay? All right. Now, Robodeer, I can already tell you that one's factorable. So guess what? Factor it. But if you can't factor to save your life, here's what you can use. All right. So we take half of 8. Half of 8 is 4. When you square 4, you get 16. The 16 gets added to both sides. We write this in its condensed form. It is the square of b plus 4. Over here, negative 17 plus 16 is 9. We're going to take the square root of both sides. The square root of 9 is 3. And again, we consider the positive and negative case. Robodeer, it sounds like you've done that. Yes, we are doing the same thing every time. It just so happens that the number combinations are different. So we get negative 4 plus or minus 3. Okay, so from here, I have to break this up into the two math problems. So this is negative 4 plus 3, which is negative 1, but it's also negative 4 minus 3, which is negative 7. So my solutions are negative 7 and negative 1. Remember, this is more negative. It's further to the left on the number line. This one is closer to 0. Okay, so keep that in mind. Okay, let's look at this next one. This is probably one of my favorites. Okay, this one's a little different. Number one, because of the awkward pauses. And I'm knocking in the awkward pauses just to really throw you off. It's okay. It looks awkward. You're going to pause for a minute. That's okay. This is already in the form that I want, okay? I am going to leave some space here, though, because I really need that in order to add it to both sides. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing that I've been doing all along. All right, half of 16 is 8. 8 squared is 64. All right, Robodeer, this one is weird. B plus 8 squared equals 0. All right, I'm still going to do the same thing that I did a minute ago. I'll take the square root here. I'll take the square root here. Now, let's go and have the difficult conversation that nobody wants to have. 0 is neither positive nor negative. So putting a little plus minus symbol in front of that is a moot point. 0 is neither positive nor negative. So we're not going to take the positive of 0. We're not going to take the negative of 0. It's just 0. Now to solve for b. We'll subtract 8 on both sides. This one has one solution, and that one solution is negative 8. Now, down the road, we will talk about this as being a double root. You'll talk about that when you get to Algebra 2 in the 11th grade. But I just want you to know this graph, think about it, it's a parabola, shifted 8 units to the left. There's only one root because it only touches the x-axis once, okay? Dang, how dare she throw in all this old stuff that we did. Yeah, man, it's all related. All right, number 7, let's look at this one. Okay, what do you notice right away? Well, you notice there's that 5 in front. I know likey, so guess what? I'm gonna divide it out. I'm gonna divide it out here, but if I divide it out here, I have to divide it out everywhere, okay? Because remember, the goal here is to maintain equality. So 5v squared divided by 5 is v squared, minus 30v divided by 5 is 6v, my bad, plus 40 divided by 5 is 8, and 0 divided by 5 is 0, okay? So when you solve by factoring, that 5 goes in the front. When you solve by completing the square, the 5 divides out, and we're still good to go, okay? So now it looks like what we've been doing for the past 6 problems. So now we're going to do the same thing. Oh my gosh, you tell your mom and dad, Miss Robadier is doing the same thing every time. Yes, she is. That's what algebra is. But hopefully you start to establish a routine, and that's when you start to solve these. Half of -6 is -3. -3 squared is 9. We add it to both sides. In doing so, we write the factored form as x minus 3 squared equals 1. We'll take the square root. I don't know why I wrote it in here, but I figure we'll finish with a bang. So this is x minus 3 equals positive and -1. We'll add 3 to both sides, and then we'll get x equals 3 plus or minus 1, okay? And then 3 plus 1 is 4. 3 minus 1 is 2. All right, there they are. Okay, last one. Again, you cannot complete the square with a number in front of the quadratic term. The coefficient must be 1. Otherwise, we can't do any completing the square. This one's also a little different because there's no space here. It's already, the variables are already isolated. So the first thing we're going to do is divide everything by 2. P squared plus 1p. Oh my gosh, Robadier, I messed myself up. That equals 2. Dang. We haven't done an odd yet. Yeah, we haven't, but I feel like you need to see them, to see one of them. Okay, so we have to take half of 1. What's half of 1? This one I'm going to write below. 1/2. I need to write it this way. 1/2 plus 1/2 is 1. Okay, that's good. Okay. I wrote it like this because now I can square. I can look at this and square the fraction. What's 1 squared? 1. So that goes up here. What is 2 squared? 4. So if we're going to add 1/4 to the right, oh, and that's positive. Come on, Robadier, keep it together. Then we're going to add 1/4 here. When we do that, 2 plus 1/4 is 9/4. You're killing me, Smalls. That's okay, because you have a fraction and you can take the square root. And again, I'm going to write out this radical because I really want you to see it. Okay, and we know the positive and negative case. All right, p plus 1/2 squared equals the positive or negative square root of 9/4. Now, this is easy. This becomes p plus 1/2. Okay, to take the square root of a fraction, make a fraction of the square roots. What's the square root of 9? The square root of 9 is 3. That's my numerator. Oh, don't forget these. What's the square root of 4? 2. There it is. That's it. That's all I had to do. Yes, fractions are not the devil that you think they are. Just run with them, man. Okay, now we're going to subtract the 1/2. So we get p equals negative 1/2 plus or minus 3/2. Okay, this one I'm actually not going to write the way I've been writing. I'm going to write it below so that you can kind of see it. You're going to say, oh my gosh, that's it. Yeah, man, that's it. Negative 1/2 plus 3/2 is 2/2, which is 1. Of course, you can always use your calculator too. Negative 1/2 minus 3/2 is negative 4/2, which is negative 2. Boom. There it is. Okay? Have a good one.